What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the JT Sports Podcast. I'm your host, JT. Hope that everybody had a great weekend. And I can't think of a better way to start off the week than talking some football. Julio Jones has me feeling old as hell right now. He has officially announced his retirement from the league. I remember I was in fourth grade when he first got drafted by the Falcons. And to be an adult at 23 years old, having witnessed the entirety of his career from dominating at Alabama to dominating all those years in the NFL on the Falcons, I feel like it's only right but to lead off this episode by giving somewhat of a retrospective on his career, moments that I'm always going to remember, and where he ranks among receivers all time. And then we'll dive into some NFL draft talk. Where's Shedeur Sanders going to land? The NFL draft is just around the corner, and a month ago it looked like he was a lock to be a top 3 pick, but now he can go anywhere as high as being selected second overall by the Browns to maybe being one of the last players selected in the first round. Ashton, Jeanty, where's he going to go? You normally don't see running backs getting drafted in the top 10 that often, but if you're the Las Vegas Raiders, I feel like getting Ashton Jeanty 6th overall is an absolute no-brainer. The Dallas Cowboys, I don't know a nicer way to put this, but Jerry Jones is holding this team back to the point where they're not going to be good until this dude is 6 feet under. And I'm not trying to be disrespectful when I say that, but with the moves that they've made this offseason, I can't be nothing but frustrated with how he continues to hold this fan base and this team hostage from being able to be a Super Bowl contender again. And then Aaron Rodgers and Kirk Cousins, they got some issues going on. Aaron is still holding out hope that the Vikings want him instead of going where he's appreciated, going to the organization that actually wants him, that being the Steelers. And Kirk Cousins, he wants the Falcons to cut him so he can have the opportunity to start again, but the Falcons will have to take a $75 million cap hit to do it. So Kirk Cousins is kind of being a little bit delusional right now. So we'll dive into it all. But before we do, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel if you're new. If you have any questions, NFL, college football that you would like answered, you can send them in the DMs on Instagram at JTSports_ and on X at JTSports__. We want to hear from you. We want to answer your questions in the mailbag episode. So go ahead, drop your questions in the DMs. Give us a follow as well on those platforms. Without further ado, let's dive into it. There's no better time machine than sports. I was in fourth grade, 9 years old, when Julio Jones first came into the NFL. And despite me just getting into football at that age, I watched a lot of him when he was at Alabama. And I didn't know a lot about football then, but I did know one thing. Now, Julio Jones was a freaking alien. You talk about somebody that looked like he was built of creative player on Madden, that was Julio Jones. He was everything that you wanted in a prototypical wide receiver one. Incredible size, 6'3", 220 pounds, but a monster after the catch. And if you were a starting cornerback in the league, there was not a single wide receiver that you didn't want to line up against more than Julio Jones, because this brother was just simply unstoppable in his prime. Monster after the catch. He could moss you winning 50-50 balls. In terms of where Julio Jones ranks all time, he's a top 5 wide receiver in my opinion. He's up there with Jerry Rice, Calvin Johnson, Randy Moss, and Antonio Brown. That's about it. And during the 2010s, you were always getting into debates in the lunchroom about who was better, him or Antonio Brown. Not so much Calvin Johnson, because Calvin Johnson, once you got into the 2010s, his career didn't last as long as what you would have thought of. So then it only became Julio versus Antonio Brown. Now, I personally feel like it's a tie between the two. I don't really have a preference of who was better. I am a Steelers fan, so I do kind of lean Antonio Brown, but Julio Jones was a monster in his own right. You can't really go wrong with either one of you. Have to pick between the two. They both were two of the most dominant receivers of my generation growing up, becoming a fan of football. And a moment that I would never forget was when I drafted Julio Jones in 2016 with my first pick in my fantasy football league with my homies. And he ended up having like 50 or 60 points when he went up against the Carolina Panthers. He had like 300 yards receiving. Julio Jones' nickname should have been Nightmare because that's what he was as a wide receiver. You see Julio Jones lining up against you, why would you even want to think of trying to tackle that? Trying to tackle Julio Jones like trying to tackle a freight train in the open field. And although Julio Jones bounced around a lot during the telling of his career, he got traded from Atlanta to Tennessee, then bounced from Tampa Bay to Philadelphia. I don't really remember those stints. I'm always going to remember Julio Jones as the Atlanta Falcon when it's all said and done. And I'm waiting for the Falcons to sign him on a one-day contract. It's only right that the greatest player in the history of the Atlanta Falcons retires at the place where it all started. And some Falcons fans will push back on that. Some will say that Mike Vick or Matt Ryan is the greatest Falcon of all time. But Julio Jones is one of the greatest to ever play his position. And if you're one of the all-time greats at your position, you automatically qualify for being one of the greatest players for the history of said franchise. And when I think of the Falcons, Julio Jones is the first player that comes to mind. He was just so iconic wearing that Atlanta Falcons uniform, putting on that number 11. He had one of the greatest catches in Super Bowl history against the New England Patriots. He had an incredible catch in that game that got overshadowed because they went on to choke that 28-3 lead, and Julian Edelman also had an all-time great catch in that game as well. But Julio Jones, it's just such a tragedy that he accomplished everything that there is to accomplish, playing the game of football, national champion at Alabama, multiple time Pro Bowler, first team All-Pro in the NFL, future first ballot Hall of Fame without a doubt. But the only thing that he doesn't have is that illustrious Super Bowl ring. And it kind of just leaves a sour taste in my mouth because you would have loved to see Julio Jones have that hardware on his finger for how great of a career he had. And ultimately, Julio Jones, when it's all said and done, I don't see how he doesn't end up being a first ballot Hall of Famer. When it comes to wide receiver play of the 2010s, it doesn't get any better than Julio Jones. Like I said, you can't go wrong with either him or Mr. Big Chest. They were both just as dominant. They were like 1A, 1B, but Julio Jones was just so much of a headache to handle for opposing defenses because you automatically had to double team him. You weren't going to leave him in one-on-one coverage unless you had a guy like a Chris Harris Jr. or Darrelle Revis on him. And even then, he was a handful for some of the best cornerbacks in the game. Julio Jones was just one of those all-time great players that you knew from his first snap playing at Alabama. How many players have you seen start their freshman seasons for Nick Saban? Not too many. That right there showed you how special this guy truly was. And as far as I'm concerned, Julio Jones is already in the Hall of Fame right now. You don't need to wait 4 or 5 years down the road for the nominations to come in. He already is in the Hall of Fame. I don't get why we drag out some of these Hall of Fame inductions. For guys like Tom Brady, as soon as he retires, he should be in the Hall of Fame. Same thing with Julio Jones. And I almost shed a tear watching his retirement video. Because the older I get and I start to see these players enter the league and they start to retire, the more I start to feel like I'm nearing Unk status. I can tell some of the younger generation wasn't really hip to some of these guys like a Julio Jones and whatnot, because I saw some people in the comment section trying to say, how he ended his last 3 years kind of taints his legacy. No, the hell it doesn't. For certain players, with how dominant Julio Jones was throughout his career with the Falcons, you don't even care about, how bad it ended. All you do is remember the great moments. And 3 years of him not really being that good doesn't taint what was, one of the best careers that we've seen from a wide receiver in the history of this league. And just to have to live with the realization that Julio Jones has been officially retired. I know he's been out of the league for some time pretty much, but it just hits different. At the start of the draft process, it seemed like Shedeur Sanders was a sure thing to be a top 3 pick. The Cleveland Browns, with the disaster that was the Deshaun Watson trade, giving him 230 fully guaranteed, him getting injured once again, you felt like Shedeur was going to be the replacement for him, since when you get a rookie quarterback on a cheap deal, it's an easy way to bounce back from a terrible situation like that. But now it's coming out that the Browns are leaning towards drafting Travis Hunter with the 2nd overall pick, which means that 3rd overall for the New York Giants, it comes down to Abdul Carter or Shedeur Sanders. With them getting Jameis Winston and Russell Wilson, though, it seems unlikely that they're going to draft Shedeur, because then you'll have 4 quarterbacks on the roster. Don't forget, they re-signed Tommy DeVito. So you got him, you got Russ, and you got Jameis. Adding Shedeur just doesn't seem likely for the Giants. And plus, when you have a general manager and a head coach that are on the hot seat, they're trying to save their jobs, you wonder how much trust they have in a guy like a Shedeur Sanders, who isn't seen as a generational quarterback talent. Do they believe that Shedeur could start week 1 right away and give them the best chance to save their jobs? I don't think so. If you are the New York Giants, you're probably better off going with a proven veteran, considering your circumstances with your GM and your head coach being on the hot seat. So if Shedeur doesn't go in the top 3, we could see him fall all the way to 21 to the Pittsburgh Steelers. And I got my fingers crossed as a Steeler fan that Pittsburgh ends up selecting Shedeur Sanders. I know some of y'all may call it wishful thinking, but a brother can dream. Can I? Shedeur is everything that you look for as far as a franchise quarterback. He's accurate, takes good care of the football. I think he's a great leader. His teammates love him at Colorado. And the narrative that the media has about Shedeur Sanders is way different from how his teammates talk about him. Every time the game was on the line, his teammates always believed they had a chance to win because of 2 at quarterback. And if the Giants and the Browns end up passing on Shedeur for Abdul Carter and Travis Hunter, I don't see anything wrong with that. It's just that you could be passing up on what will be eventually one of the best quarterbacks in the game. I have a hard time picturing the son of Deion Sanders being a bust. Just with the genes, I don't see it. Shedeur has been groomed and he's been raised for this moment all his entire life. There is not a single prospect in this draft who is better suited to handle the spotlight than Shedeur Sanders. And he's not the flashiest quarterback in the world. He's been compared to guys like Andy Dalton, which I don't think is a bad comp. Andy Dalton had a really good career. If you could get Andy Dalton out of Shedeur Sanders, you're getting a damn good quarterback. Like, Andy Dalton was taking the Cincinnati Bengals to the playoffs like nearly every single season for the first couple of years of his career in the AFC North, with Big Ben at his peak, with the Baltimore Ravens still being really good. But I feel Shedeur Sanders is going to end up being a lot better than Andy Dalton. I feel he does a really good job of throwing guys open. Just with the Steelers quarterback situation right now, you don't know if you're going to be able to get Aaron Rodgers or not. And even if you do, you still have to have a plan for the future. That's been the Steelers' problem. They've never had the opportunity to get one of the best quarterbacks in the draft outside of drafting Kenny Pickett, who had no business being the first-round pick at all. Shedeur Sanders is a lot different, though. And him with Mike Tomlin will be the perfect fit. He gets to sit for a year behind a head coach who I'm pretty sure Deion would love for him to play with. Mike Tomlin's a really good motivator. He's a player's coach. And plus, with the popularity that he already has, when Shedeur gets drafted, he automatically is going to be one of the most popular players in the league. His jersey's going to sell like crazy. Everybody's going to be talking about him. The Steelers with Mike Tomlin have been accustomed to handling guys that have big personalities. Antonio Brown, Big Ben, George Pickens. Shedeur would be no different. If Mike Tomlin can get a Hall of Fame career out of Antonio Brown, he can get a Hall of Fame career out of Shedeur Sanders. That's how good I feel Shedeur Sanders would be if he gets drafted by the Pittsburgh Steelers. And there's a great chance that he ends up falling in the draft to Pittsburgh, because outside of the Browns and the Giants, the Jets, they just signed Justin Fields. How likely are they to double dip at quarterback? The New Orleans Saints, what are they going to do 9th overall? Could they get their quarterback of the future and take Shedeur Sanders, or could they take best player available? I really believe that there is a true path to the Pittsburgh Steelers landing Shedeur Sanders in this year's draft, and I'm hoping that it happens. I love every time I wake up and I see more news that scouts are taking Shedeur Sanders off their boards. You're getting a little bit turned off by him, because I'm like, perfect. Keep sleeping on him so he can be the perfect draft day steal for the Steelers. I wanted Pittsburgh to draft Lamar Jackson back in 2018, and my heart was broken when we passed on him for Terrell Edmonds. And then the Ravens traded back into the first round to draft Lamar. Now I got to see him 2 times a year destroying the Pittsburgh Steelers. Shedeur would finally give the Steelers a chance to be a Super Bowl contender as long as he's able to reach his potential within his second, third year in the league, which, if Shedeur Sanders puts it all together, he's the black version of Joe Burrow. That's what his game looks like when you watch him. That's how prolific he was when he was playing at Colorado. He changed that entire program. Before he got there, Colorado was irrelevant. They haven't been good since the 90s. Then Deion arrives to Boulder with his Louis luggage, which Travis and Shedeur were part of that, and they became one of the best stories in college football. And the main reason why folks hate Shedeur is because of who his pops is. But if you can separate the hate that you have for Deion and just evaluate Shedeur as the player, he's a really good quarterback. He's not, somebody that's going to light your own world with crazy physical attributes. He's not the athlete that a guy like Anthony Richardson is. And despite being Deion's son and sharing his genes, you would expect a little bit more out of him from the athletic department. But he's a functional starting quarterback. And that's what the Pittsburgh Steelers need. And you got somebody that has aura. You got somebody that has a little bit of moxie to him. You got somebody that's going to have the ability to get his teammates rallying behind him. I'm having my fingers crossed that the Steelers are able to walk away from this draft with Shedeur Sanders and not Jackson Dart. If they take Jackson Dart, that's going to be the final nail in the coffin for Mike Tomlin as the head coach of Pittsburgh. Jackson Dart is simply not it. Shedeur's just a way better quarterback in terms of accuracy, decision-making. Every time the game was on the line and Shedeur had to come through for Colorado, he came through the majority of times. But I can recall several instances when Jackson Dart choked away a game for Ole Miss, such as late in the season when they lost on the road against Florida. He was awful in that game, especially in the fourth quarter. Shedeur would be the perfect quarterback for the Steelers to draft, to sit behind Aaron Rodgers for a year, and then eventually take over the mantle on a team that, by that point, when we get into 2026, should be in Super Bowl contention. They've invested a lot of draft capital into improving the offensive line. You got a really good wide receiving core if you're able to extend George Pickens to a long-term contract. And Mike Tomlin, with a guy like a Shedeur Sanders, finally will give him good enough quarterback play to compete with the other top teams in the AFC, because this is the conference that's home to the majority of the NFL's best quarterbacks, and you're not going to be able to make a deep playoff run if you don't have good quarterback play. The Steelers could finally get that out of Shedeur Sanders. So I hope that he falls in the draft and the Steelers are able to walk away with their franchise quarterback. They haven't had one since Big Ben hung it up. They haven't had a plan at this position, and they still don't have one. But Shedeur Sanders could finally solve the biggest issue that the Steelers have been struggling to fix. Running backs normally don't get drafted in the top 10 due to the short shelf life that the position has and how easy it is to replace. But Ashton Jeanty is a little different. He's the kind of running back that if you draft 6th overall, if you're the Las Vegas Raiders, you're going to get somebody that day one is going to become immediately one of the best at his position. Ashton Jeanty, with how good he is right now, I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up being an immediate All-Pro in his rookie season. And the Las Vegas Raiders, they don't have a lot of talent on offense. You do have Brock Bowers, who had the best rookie season we've ever seen for a tight end. He was an All-Pro in year one. You get Ashton Jeanty, you will have another weapon on that offense. Ashton Jeanty isn't just your traditional running back. He's a weapon. You can run him out wide. He's a better receiver than what you think. He has really good hands, and he's a threat to take it to the house every time he gets his hands on the football. The guy just breaks tackles with ease. It's like he has baby oil on him with how he's just able to slip out of guys' hands, how he's just able to make all of these crazy spin moves. He has a rare blend of elusiveness and power that you don't normally see out of the running back position. And when you're looking for a first-round caliber running back, you're looking for somebody that has elite explosiveness, somebody that has elite acceleration. They get the football and they go 0 to 100 instantly. That's what you see when you watch Jahmyr Gibbs, Bijan Robinson, and Saquon Barkley play. That's what the standard is for first-round running backs. Ashton Jeanty is in that same tier. He's one of the best running back prospects that I have ever evaluated. Not only is he good at getting a lot of yards after contact, but he has great vision, regardless if he is behind a bad offensive line. With how patient he is and how good his vision is, he's able to just find just the smallest holes, and he's able to explode through them. The Las Vegas Raiders just extended Geno Smith to like a 2-year mega extension. And when Geno Smith was at his best with the Seattle Seahawks is when he had a ground game. He hasn't had a good ground game these last 2 years. If the Raiders get Ashton Jeanty, now you're able to utilize play action, which is what Geno Smith thrives at. He's one of the most accurate deep ball throwers in the league. Now you're able to have a balanced offense. What killed the Raiders offensively last year wasn't just them having subpar quarterback play, but they were the worst team in the NFL running the football. If you want to be able to survive in the toughest division, the AFC West, home to 4 Hall of Fame coaches when you include Pete Carroll, Jim Harbaugh, along with Sean Payton and Andy Reid, all 3 of those teams have the ability to play complementary football. We know what the Chargers' MO is. They want to run the football at will down your throat. The Denver Broncos, they also are trying to improve their running back room. And if the Las Vegas Raiders pass on Ashton Jeanty, then you risk having to go up against this guy 2 times a year if he's available on the board when it's the Broncos' turn to pick. You give the Broncos a guy like Ashton Jeanty, the Raiders are going to be in for a nightmare season year one under Pete Carroll, because then you're going to have to worry about Bo Nix, Courtland Sutton, then Ashton Jeanty to go along with that. The Raiders are better off drafting Ashton Jeanty, not allowing him to fall in the hands of their divisional rival. Plus, this is a weak draft class. Who else, 6th overall, do you know is going to be able to help you win immediately? Pete Carroll isn't in this thing for a long-term rebuild. I keep hearing rebuild. It's going to take some time. Pete Carroll's the oldest head coach in the NFL. He's like 70-something years old. He doesn't have all these years to rebuild a team slowly, trade back, and acquire capital for next year. He's trying to hit the ground running. He's trying to win now. That's why they went out and they got Geno Smith. If the goal was for the Raiders to rebuild for 3 to 4 years, they would have hired a younger head coach, and they wouldn't have hired the oldest one in the league. Drafting Ashton Jeanty just makes so much sense for the Las Vegas Raiders. And their general manager, Spytech, he came out and pretty much said that his son is going to disown them if they do pass on Ashton Jeanty. Now, of course, that's a little bit, fabricated somewhat. I'm pretty sure he doesn't mean it that way, but his son really does love Ashton Jeanty a lot. And I definitely think that with what the Raiders brass has said about Ashton Jeanty over the course of this draft process, he definitely is in the mix for being taken 6th overall. And Tom Brady is the guy who pretty much is running the show, calling the shots in Las Vegas. He hired the GM. He hired Pete Carroll. I could see him taking Ashton Jeanty. This is a weak draft. You don't have a lot of superstar players in this draft, so therefore, you don't have the opportunity to be super selective. Ashton Jeanty, don't overthink it if you're the Las Vegas Raiders. Get somebody that you know is going to be an all-pro caliber player for at least the next 4 to 5 years. I see Ashton Jeanty as a Hall of Fame caliber back, potentially. Not saying that he will turn into that, but at least you know that when you draft him, you're getting somebody that immediately is going to contribute to making you a better football team. If you draft Shedeur Sanders and the goal is to sit him for a year, how better are you getting right away if you're Pete Carroll and you're trying to win? If the goal is to build for long-term success, then passing on Ashton Jeanty in favor of a quarterback makes sense. But if Pete Carroll and Tom Brady are truly trying to live up to their promise of turning this thing around as fast as possible, they would draft Ashton Jeanty. There's not too many better players in this draft. Honestly, if I had to give you the 3 best players in this class in order, it would be Travis Hunter at 1, Ashton Jeanty 2, and then Abdul Carter 3. There are only about 15 players most people assume are worth being a first-round selection. So the Raiders don't have too many options to just pass on a guy. You want to take an offensive tackle in a tackle class that isn't that good? Or you want to draft a receiver high? You want to take Ted McMillan out of Arizona? I don't know about that. Drafting Ashton Jeanty just makes a lot of sense. Go ahead, get you somebody that you know right out the gate is going to be a lead at their position and is going to add to Brock Bowers and what you already have on the offense in terms of weaponry, which you don't really have too much of. Getting Ashton Jeanty now with Brock Bowers, you now have 2 all-pro caliber players on your offense. Then in rounds 2, 3, 4, you can beef up the offensive line, maybe get another guard, another tackle, find another good wide receiver like a Torrey Horton who played pretty much in your backyard, essentially. The draft plan for the Raiders is simple. You take Ashton Jeanty 6 overall. You get you somebody that's automatically going to become one of the best at their position right out the gate. And you get somebody that's going to make you a better football team instantly his first game as a starter. The Cowboys aren't going to be good until Jerry Jones is dead. I don't know if I'm going to get demonetized by saying that, but that's the God honest truth. Until the Cowboys can have Jerry Jones in a role that doesn't involve him making football decisions, not only are they not going to be good, but they're going to run the risk of being the worst team in the division. The Washington Commanders in free agency, what did they do? They get Deebo Samuel and they acquire Laremy Tunsil, one of the best left tackles in the league. They are already a way better team this season than what they were last year. The New York Giants are making moves in free agency. Everybody in this division is getting better while the Dallas Cowboys are getting worse with these cheap deals that they keep signing guys to. They are assembling the all-bust team, it looks like. Jerry Jones is trying to see if he can get some juice out of guys like Kenneth Murray, Kyra Elon, Peyton Turner, Solomon Thomas. All these guys were former first-round picks, and they've been bust up to this point in their careers. But yet Jerry Jones thinks that there's some hidden value in these guys and that they can find a way to get the most out of them. All Jerry Jones is doing is further hurting the Dallas Cowboys and torturing this fan base. I'm really shocked that the Cowboys continue to be one of the most watched teams and they have one of the most passionate fan bases when Jerry Jones doesn't give the Cowboys fan base much to be passionate about. What is there to be passionate about when you know that at best you're going to be a 12-win team and you're going to be an early exit come playoff time? This is a franchise that hasn't competed for a Super Bowl since VHS tapes were around. Jerry Jones is ruining the Dallas Cowboys. And it really frustrates me that he continues to make these boneheaded decisions thinking that he's doing what's in the best interest of this team when all he's doing is helping this team be easier to beat. I laughed when I saw a clip on Instagram a few weeks ago during the season when Philadelphia Eagles fans were praising Jerry Jones, saying, "You're doing a great job, Jerry." And Jerry's laughing and saying, "Thank you, thank you." And what disturbs me the most about that clip is that he did seriously thinks that Eagles fans are complimenting him on doing a great job when they kind of are like insulting him, saying, "You're doing such a great job of making it easy to beat you." If the Dallas Cowboys were better ran, they would have had like 2-3 Super Bowls by now this past decade. This is a team that normally drafts pretty well. They develop pretty well. They make pretty good staff hires. They always have pretty good coordinators. They always have a really good defensive coordinator. But what holds them back is that Jerry Jones is just such a big cheapskate. You know, he's always trying to find value instead of going after guys that have proven elite value. Why are you wasting draft capital on a guy like a Trey Lance when you could have used that draft capital on getting you a proven starter that possibly could have turned into another high impact level player? You trade for Jonathan Mingo. We barely saw him on the field last year. Now Jerry Jones is at it again, making another bad decision by holding out on paying Michael Parsons, trying to play it safe, saying you'd rather be safe than sorry, when Michael Parsons has already proven to be one of the best at his position. All you're doing is making it a lot harder to pay him because next year, the price is going to go up even further. If you pay him right now, you're paying him somewhat $40 million a year. You wait next season, you might end up having to pay him $50 million a year. Why wait and pay more when you can get him for less now? Jerry Jones' logic is 2 + 2 = 6, and that's why the Dallas Cowboys continue to underachieve like they have for so many years. It's embarrassing that Cowboy fans continue to support a team with an owner that just has lost all sense of reality. Jerry used to be really good when it came to evaluating talent and putting together a good team. Not so much anymore. And his son saved them from making one of the biggest mistakes in draft history when he wanted to draft Johnny Manziel, and his son had to step in and say, nah, let's go ahead and take Zach Martin. The Cowboys are not going to be good again. They're not going to be relevant in terms of the Super Bowl conversation or even the playoff conversation until Jerry Jones is 6 feet under, because he's one of those dudes that is going to continue to run this team until he can't no more. He's going to be in a damn hover round, still making decisions for the Dallas Cowboys, still holding this team back from success because he still thinks that all these moves that he's making are helping making the Cowboys a better team when all he's doing is furthering making this team easier to beat in the division that's getting incredibly difficult. The Eagles just won the Super Bowl. The Washington Commanders were a game shy of making it to the Super Bowl. They both have elite quarterbacks. They both have really good rosters. And the Dallas Cowboys, they're getting left further and further behind in the division that at one point they were without a doubt the kings of. How have the Philadelphia Eagles have more success than Dallas over the last decade when the Dallas Cowboys have had teams that have in the past been just as good as what the Eagles have just won the Super Bowl with? Because Jerry Jones is a freaking idiot now. That's why the Cowboys are not going to be good until this dude is 6 feet under. And I know it sounds a little bit harsh to say that, but that's reality. He's not going to stop making these stupid signings, these stupid, idiotic moves until he can no longer be able to do so. This is a tragedy that the most valuable franchise in all of sports is just so poorly ran because you have an owner that thinks that he's making the best moves to make this team a Super Bowl contender when all he's doing is making this team one of the worst in the league. That's what I expect the Cowboys to be this year. They've lost so much depth, so much talent over the last couple of years. It's hard to see them winning anything more than 8 games at best. It's not that I don't believe in their new head coach. It's not a Dak Prescott problem. It's a Jerry Jones problem. If you have somebody that was better at making personnel decisions, front office moves, the Cowboys would have already won the Super Bowl with Dak Prescott. Dak Prescott is good enough to win a Super Bowl. All you have to do is put together 3-4 good games in the month of January, and boom, you're in the Super Bowl. Boom, you're holding the Lombardi trophy. But no, because Jerry Jones does a poor job of assembling good rosters. He's the owner, he's the GM, and he's not going to give up control to anybody else outside of family. I heard a clip where he said that, I ain't buying this team to let somebody else run it. I bought this team to run it with my family. Okay, cool, Jerry. So if you bought the team to run it with your family, how about you take a step back and let your son run it? Somebody that has a little bit more common sense than what you do. Look, I'm not against giving up a mid-round pick for Joe Milton. Joe Milton, with the upside that he has, I feel like it's worth the risk. What frustrates me about the moves that Jerry Jones is making is that you keep signing all of these cheap players that have really proven to be serviceable starters. You have Kenneth Murray, Kyra Elam, Peyton Turner, and Solomon Thomas. If you have to rely on 2 or 3 of these guys to start for you at any point during this season, you're fucked. It's pathetic, the job that Jerry Jones has done this offseason when it comes to acquiring talent to make the Cowboys a better team. And all he is doing now is further making this team a laughingstock. There's no reason to have any optimism the Cowboys are going to be a playoff team. There's no reason to have any optimism that this is going to be a team that is ever going to compete for a Super Bowl until Jerry Jones is in the grave. I'm getting real sick and tired of Aaron Rodgers shenanigans, man. He has an offer on the table to play for the Pittsburgh Steelers, a place that wants him, a place that actually values him, but instead of going where he's appreciated, he wants to wait for the Minnesota Vikings to reject him one more time. You know, for Aaron Rodgers at this stage of his career, you don't have too many options. Why would you want to go to a place in Minnesota that already told you they don't want you, but then they might change their mind and be like, you know what, Aaron, you were our last option. We're going to bring you in, although we didn't really want you in the first place. Going to Pittsburgh is the best move for Aaron Rodgers' career. With Mike Tomlin already being a guaranteed lock to win 9-10 games with random quarterbacks, imagine the success that the Steelers can have if Aaron Rodgers can get them top 15 quarterback play. That's all Mike Tomlin needs. The defense is always pretty good. It's not that the defense is overrated. It's that the defense throughout the season, they get worn out because they're on the field for more snaps than what they should be due to incompetent quarterback play, which makes the offense inefficient. Aaron, despite having a disappointing tenure in New York, he still was a top 12 quarterback statistically. He was top 10 in passing touchdowns, and he also still had the ability to be really accurate. The offensive line that the Steelers are going to have next season is going to be better than any offensive line that they put on the field over the last 3-4 years. They have invested a lot of draft capital into the offensive line, and their first-round offensive tackle from last year out of Washington didn't even play last year. So you're going to have him back fully healthy. You might be able to move Broderick Jones back to his natural position. You know, like, the Pittsburgh Steelers have a way better team than what people give them credit for. DK Metcalf, George Pickens, why would you not want to throw to that if you're Aaron Rodgers? Pat Freiermuth, one of the more underrated tight ends in the game. The Steelers have weapons on offense. Yeah, the Minnesota Vikings have more weapons than what the Steelers do, and you would love to link up if you are going to make one last run in your career with an offensive-minded coach. But Aaron Rodgers going to Pittsburgh, let's be honest, he pretty much be calling the shots. But Arthur Smith is a pretty capable offensive coordinator. Last year, the Steelers were top 15 in total offense. They were above average offense statistically, which is better than anything they've put on the field on that side of the ball in 5 years. Arthur Smith was able to win games with Justin Fields, and he was able to make Russell Wilson look somewhat serviceable until he eventually got exposed the final month of the season. With Aaron Rodgers, Arthur Smith, I think, could have a really good year calling plays for Pittsburgh. What held him back is you got a quarterback in Russell Wilson that can only throw deep balls and goal balls, and that's about it. If you can't throw the ball deep with Russ, you're cooked. He takes too long to get the ball out of his hands. And even when he does get the ball out of his hands fast, he's nothing but a check down Charlie. Aaron Rodgers, I would take him over Tua. I would take him over Geno Smith. There's a handful of quarterbacks that I would take Aaron Rodgers first over. I don't feel like Aaron Rodgers is at the stage of his career where he's washed. He doesn't have anything left in the tank. This is going to be what Big Ben looked like when his career came to an end in Pittsburgh, which was pretty ugly. Aaron Rodgers still has at least one more year left of good football. All the Steelers need is for him to sign on the dotted line, stop dragging this process out, waiting for a team that has no interest in them to maybe change their mind. This is like chasing a girl that doesn't want you. This is the equivalent to DMing a girl, hey, 50 million times, not getting any responses, but you keep on sitting there, hey, because maybe one day she might give you a shot. This is Aaron Rodgers waiting for the Minnesota Vikings to tell him no once again. Stop making this shit complicated, Aaron. It's pretty simple. The Steelers want you. This is the best place for you. You need to go ahead and sign that doggone contract. And instead of dragging this thing out, link up with your new teammates, get the chemistry down packed. You know why? The longer you continue to milk out this process, the harder and more difficult you're going to make it to, get acclimated to the new playbook, get acclimated to the new system, get acclimated to your new teammates. It's like you will want to get a jump on this as fast as possible. Wherever you go, you're going to have to deal with a young quarterback breathing down your shoulders. If you go to the Minnesota Vikings and you end up stinking it up for the first month, you're going to get replaced by J.J. McCarthy. But if you end up going to Pittsburgh, regardless if they have a young quarterback, Mike Tomlin is going to be a little bit more lenient with you. He's going to be a little bit more patient. Aaron needs to stop with all of these charades and all of these games and just sign with the team that values him. Sign with the team that actually wants him instead of trying to wait on a team that maybe or maybe not want to give you an opportunity to start again. If I'm Aaron Rodgers right now, I'm flying back up to Pittsburgh and I'm signing that doggone contract. There's no point in continuing to waste time hoping that the Vikings might not feel like J.J. McCarthy is ready when you could go to a team that already cherishes you. You're supposed to go where you're appreciated, not where you're tolerated. Aaron Rodgers, I don't care about his anti-vax takes. I don't care about his political stances. As a Steeler fan at this point, I just want serviceable quarterback play. And if Aaron Rodgers can give the Steelers that, they got a good chance of being able to end this playoff drought. But with him dragging this process on, he does nothing but make it more difficult for himself. He's making it even more difficult for the Steelers because now they're still trying to figure out how they're going to go about this quarterback situation. I don't believe what Mike Tomlin's trying to sell Mason Rudolph. Mason Rudolph is a good backup, a good third-string option to have. He's not a good option to roll into the season with as your starting quarterback. I really wish that Aaron Rodgers would stop dragging this thing out. He would just go ahead and make a doggone decision. Kirk Cousins is at odds with the Atlanta Falcons front office. He wants the team to do him a solid. Cut him, let him get an opportunity to start for another team, while the Atlanta Falcons get nothing in return but a dead cap hit of $75 million and putting the team in cap hell. What Kirk Cousins needs to do, instead of throwing the hissy fit around the Atlanta Falcons organization, he needs to restructure his deal and then go to the Atlanta Falcons and ask for a trade. No team is going to take on that contract. What's difficult for Kirk Cousins is that he hasn't been in a situation like this where he has no leverage. Normally, he's been able to scam teams out of millions of dollars for above-average quarterback play at best, but get compensated like one of the better quarterbacks. Well, you can't do that anymore when you just got benched for, at the time, a rookie quarterback in Michael Penix, when the team was 6-3 on top of the division. Then you go a whole month throwing more interceptions than you do touchdowns, and then you end up throwing the Atlanta Falcons out of the playoffs. Kirk Cousins signing that deal in free agency was another scam on his behalf, on his agent. Whoever his agent is, he has to be one of the richest agents in all the sports with all the money that Kirk Cousins has helped this brother get paid off from. He just continues to find a way to finesse these teams, and he can't do it no longer. You're not going to force the Atlanta Falcons to take that $75 million dead cap hit. If the Atlanta Falcons put themselves in cap hell for the sake of just getting rid of Kirk Cousins, Terry Fontenot has to get fired. He already should have been fired, but I'll give him a little bit of some slack because he has hit on a few draft picks on the offensive side of the football. Outside of Kyle Pitts, Bijan Robinson, Drake London have been really good. Michael Penix, I love him a lot. I feel like he's going to turn into a really good quarterback. But getting rid of Kirk Cousins does nothing but put the Atlanta Falcons in an unfavorable situation. It's going to be really hard to overcome that big of a cap hit. You already took a massive cap hit years ago when you decided to move on from Matt Ryan, which in hindsight might have not have been the best decision at the time. If Kirk Cousins wants to get an opportunity to start next season, he needs to restructure his deal. And if you're not willing to do that, stop pouting. If I'm Terry Fontenot and Raheem Morris, if you don't want to show up to OTAs, cool, sit out. If you don't want to show up to training camp, cool, we don't really need you anyway. You're a backup. Michael Penix is a starter. And if you choose to sit out this season, cool. We don't have to pay you anything. You lose money. You don't help yourself out in this situation. Kirk Cousins will be a fool not to be the backup for one more year and then allow the Atlanta Falcons to cut him next season. And then he has another opportunity to maybe start again. Right now, with how late into the offseason we are, with the draft being just around the corner, it doesn't really do him no good trying to manufacture a trade at this point when he's not willing to restructure. If you were willing to restructure, then it makes it a little bit easier because then teams are more willing to trade for you on a reduced rate, although you are coming off a down season and you do have some injury concerns. A team like Cleveland will be willing to give up a third or fourth round pick for you as long as they don't have to take on this massive contract that you have. The common sense isn't making sense when it comes to Kirk Cousins, and that's the prime reason why I question why common sense is called common sense if everybody doesn't seem to have it. Kirk Cousins knows doggone well with the place that he is at in this state of his career, being up there in age, regressing, coming off a terrible season, where he just completely fell apart in the second half of it, and yet he still thinks that he's some desirable quarterback, that his contract is going to be something that teams are going to want to have on their books for what he's been this last couple of years. Yeah. Kirk Cousins needs to get a grip on reality. He needs a reality check. And the reality check that the Atlanta Falcons are giving him right now should tell him, okay, if I really want to get out, I need to restructure my deal. It's not that freaking complicated. You know, every day I wake up and I keep seeing these reports about Kirk Cousins being frustrated. I say this is a you problem, Kirk Cousins, because if you would have played better and you would have been the player that the Atlanta Falcons thought they were getting when they gave you all that money and they end up getting in trouble for tampering, you wouldn't be in that position. If you are willing to restructure your deal, take less to play for another team, the one to trade for you, you would be off the Falcons by now. But no, Kirk Cousins is trying to have his cake and eat it too, and that's why he's going nowhere. The Atlanta Falcons, for the first time in a while, I actually agree with the front office stance that they're taking, which is holding firm on keeping Kirk Cousins there in the A. It was a nice story when Kirk Cousins was balling out. He had that insane game on Thursday night against the Buccaneers. He had that insane comeback Monday night against the Philadelphia Eagles. But the honeymoon phase is over. Where Kirk Cousins is at this stage of his career is probably a bottom 5 quarterback. He's a statue in the pocket. He can't move. His decision-making has gone down the drain. He had tunnel vision during the second half of the Atlanta Falcons season. The dude was throwing more interceptions to the other team than he was touchdowns to his own teammates. Kirk needs to stop making this such a big issue. Why are you just not okay with being the highest paid backup in NFL history? You know that no other team is going to guarantee you a starting job. They would be foolish to. And who at this point is even going to be wanting the trade for you? The Tennessee Titans aren't. The only feasible destination is the Cleveland Browns due to the connection that you have with Kevin Stefanski. Even then, I'd rather take a shot at Shedeur Sanders than invest in Kirk Cousins with how he has just come away with scamming all of these franchises for so many years. The Atlanta Falcons got to stand on all 10. Yes, having Kirk Cousins may not vote well for the locker room, but Kirk Cousins isn't one of those guys that I feel would be a diva in the locker room. I don't believe that Kirk Cousins is inauthentic. When he got benched in favor of Michael Penix, he was the first person that called Michael Penix to congratulate him. I don't think that Kirk Cousins plays this facade nice guy character. I really believe that he is a genuinely nice guy. If he wasn't, then we would know it by now. There would be plenty of stories of people coming out bashing his character anonymously. Like, we've had plenty of people spoke out against Russell Wilson and his character. You know, Russell Wilson is this guy that's perceived to be this nice, good guy, but once you get into the locker room, you know, guys feel differently about him. Kirk Cousins isn't that kind of person. But if he wants to have an opportunity to start again, he has to restructure that deal. It just doesn't make sense for the Falcons to cut him and get